When I was young, I lived with my parents in a small neighborhood. Halloween never really became a big event in terms of trick-or-treating or the like, so we always did something else. One thing we always enjoyed doing on Halloween was exploring spooky or abandoned places together. Funny, I never did anything like this alone or even with friends, but with my father, I felt safe and never afraid of what we might encounter, at least until today. After driving for a while, we came across an old warehouse. The place had definitely been empty for years. The sides of the building were almost collapsing, and the roof was caving in. If it weren't for the bits of paint here and there, you'd never know it used to be red. We moved through shards of glass and pieces of wood, finding abandoned equipment and trash. And then I saw it. A cute straw trinket displayed on the side of the warehouse. I pointed towards it, and my father led the way. But the closer we got, the worse the smell became. Poor thing, I heard my father say as I glanced down. It was a large raccoon lying motionless not too far from the straw. "What do you think killed it?" I asked. He inspected it briefly as I looked back towards the figure. But then I froze. Its eyes were staring directly at me. I could swear it was staring straight into the distance before. But now its eyes had shifted towards me, still smiling and sitting upright. But only its eyes moved. "Dad." He didn't respond. I looked towards him, and he pointed at the raccoon with a more disgusted expression this time. Then I saw what he saw. All its insides were missing, and usually there would be a big mess or something. But the weird part about this was it was almost unnoticeable unless you looked closely. I didn't want to look, but I glanced back at Straw again. My stomach churned as I realized it was still staring at me, but its raised eyebrows were now furrowed, and its smile was gone. Then I began to see bloodstains seeping through its tattered clothes. I felt dizzy and nauseous until my father placed his hand on my shoulder. "Maybe just a wolf," he said, then led the way out. His words made me feel better, but I wasn't sure if I believed it or not. As we walked away, I looked back at Straw, and it was still as we found it, staring into the distance and smiling with its raised eyebrows. I never told my father because I wasn't sure if what I saw was real or not, and I didn't want to worry him that I saw something and didn't lead us on an adventure again. I still don't know what I saw, or if it was real at all, but what gives me chills is that my father came back a few days later to sketch the warehouse with my younger brother, and when he returned, he showed me the photos, but there was no straw in them. Last year was the first time I truly lived alone in a house because I had just rented a small place in a new neighborhood closer to my workplace. I moved in early October, but it seemed like most neighbors chose to keep their distance, so I did too. However, everything was pretty normal for the first few weeks. Now it's Halloween time, and I realized there are only a few houses that actually decorate. They're not too elaborate. Just a few pumpkins or signs, but more than the other houses. I decided to stick a small trick-or-treat sign on my door and bought some candy to give out. In my previous place, I usually bought 3 or 4 big bags, but I felt like people here didn't really celebrate Halloween, so I figured 1 bag would be enough. Daytime came, and I got a few small groups of kids, but that was about it. I was a little disappointed because I always find Halloween fun, even if I'm just giving out candy at my house. Plus, it started getting late around 10 p.m., so I put the candy bag in the kitchen and sat on the couch to watch a horror movie as a nightcap. I think I was about halfway through the movie when I heard the doorbell ring. A little confused and annoyed, I got up and peeked through the keyhole to see who was there. I saw a figure that looked like a kid, maybe 10 or 11 years old, standing at the door in a homemade costume. It didn't look like anything specific, just black fabric with red accents and a black mask. I opened the door, and he said, "Trick or treat." Now it's almost 11 o'clock, so I'm a little worried that he's alone walking from door to door. I smiled and told him to wait a moment while I got some candy I kept. I went back to the kitchen and grabbed a handful of candy, then brought it back to the door and dropped it into the kid's pillowcase. Then I looked behind him to see if his parents were on the sidewalk or maybe a group of friends, but I didn't see anyone. He turned around and started walking away, but I stood at the door for a few seconds just to make sure he was okay. But again, I didn't see anything or anyone, so I closed the door and went back to the couch. A few minutes passed before the doorbell rang again. This time I went to the kitchen first and grabbed the candy bag, then headed to the door. When I opened it, I was surprised to see the same kid standing there but without a pillowcase or bag this time. Worried, I asked if he was okay, but he didn't answer. I looked behind him again, but this time I saw someone standing on the front yard of the neighbor across the street watching us. It looked like an adult man, but he was wearing a costume similar to the kid's. "Is that your dad over there?" I asked politely. The kid waited for a few seconds, then said yes. Then I asked him why he came back to my house, to which the kid responded by asking for more candy. I became increasingly puzzled because he didn't bring his pillowcase, but I handed the candy bag to the kid to take. But the kid looked almost annoyed for some reason, then reluctantly grabbed one piece before running off. The whole interaction made me shiver a little, so I made sure to lock my door and then went back to watching the movie. By that time it was pretty late, so I decided to get ready for bed. I got up from the couch and started walking towards the stairs, but out of the corner of my eye I saw a flickering light from outside one of my windows. Anxiously, I went to check and saw that it was the motion sensor light near my garage. I stayed by the window for a few minutes while feeling increasingly creeped out now, but nothing else happened, so I closed the curtains and headed to my bedroom. I lay in bed for maybe 30 minutes thinking about the kid from earlier and how strange everything was. But when I started to doze off, I heard a soft rumble followed by a loud knock on my front door. I jumped up and out of bed, then quietly went downstairs and approached the front door. I almost peeked through the keyhole when 3 more loud knocks rattled the door and made me jump back a little. I waited there for a few seconds, then looked. The man I had seen across the street earlier was standing there just inches from the door, still wearing the creepy black and red costume and mask. I could feel that he had something in his hand, but he was too close to the door for me to see what it was. There was no way I was opening that door because I didn't know what this person wanted from me. I knew this could be a sick prank or something much worse. I ran upstairs and grabbed my phone, then locked myself in my room and dialed 911. The man continued to pound on the door for what felt like 1 minute before it went silent. I waited there in fear, hoping he would leave for good. Then I got up and looked out my bedroom window, which had a small view of the sidewalk leading to the front door. But as I looked, the sound of glass breaking suddenly echoed from what sounded like the kitchen downstairs. I was truly scared at this point, with no way to defend myself if they came upstairs. Fortunately, only a few moments later I could hear police sirens in the distance, followed by quick footsteps outside from the downstairs. I waited for the police to call me at the front door before I went downstairs to let them in. They searched the house to make sure the man was gone, and saw the broken window in my kitchen, where the man clearly entered. I ended up staying in a hotel for a few days just to be cautious, but it seemed like the person never came back. I replayed that night in my mind multiple times, wondering if he was just using his kid as a weird way to get into my house. I didn't really know for sure, but nothing was stolen, which made me wonder what the man actually wanted by entering my house. Anyway, it's been almost a year now, and Halloween is just a few weeks away again. I'm starting to get paranoid that the man from last year might come back to finish what he started. My friends and I went trick-or-treating early a few years ago when we were 13 to 14 years old. This was the second year we went without our parents coming along with us, so we were pretty excited to run around the neighborhood collecting candy and just having fun. Something we did every year before Halloween was plan our trick-or-treating route so we could hit all the biggest houses hoping to get full-size candies. This year, a newly built street full of luxurious houses finally finished, and people had moved in, so we decided to start there and then explore to other neighborhoods afterward. This new street wasn't too far from my place, so we all met at my house on Halloween night, then set out to start trick-or-treating. We stopped at a few houses along the way just to get some extra candy, and then turned onto the sidewalk leading to the new street. To our surprise, we didn't see any other kids walking around here. We thought we were the first ones, and we were so excited and ran to the first house. A kind old man opened the door and gave each of us a full-sized Hershey chocolate bar. As we left the yard, we were all very excited because we already had a good start. But as we knocked on the next house's door, no one answered, and neither did the next house, or the one after that. One thing about this street was that every house had very large yards, so traveling between them would take almost 2 to 3 minutes after about 10 houses not answering. We started to feel like we were wasting our Halloween here and not getting anything. We could see the next house though, and it was the biggest on the street as far as we could see, so we agreed to try there first. This house had a very long front yard leading to an even larger circular one. As we were walking, I saw a woman staring at us from a small window right next to the door. But as soon as I made eye contact with her, she quickly withdrew. I thought she was just waiting for trick-or-treaters, and I was just glad to see that someone was home, and maybe had some candy for us. We climbed up the porch, and I knocked on the door almost immediately. A woman opened the door, and standing behind her was another elderly woman, the same woman I saw at their window. They both smiled as we said trick-or-treat. Then she opened the door wider, revealing a large round table set up in their large entryway. On the table, almost every kind of candy you could find in a store. I couldn't believe someone would spend this much on Halloween candy. But with a house like this, I guess it made sense. She told us to come in and pick any 2 candies we wanted without hesitation. We all went in and headed to the table to see all they had. We were all at that point very happy to be able to choose almost any candy we wanted. But as I tried to decide what my second choice would be, I heard the door shut. All of us turned around and saw the woman standing right by the door, still smiling at us. Hadn't she asked us to stay here just for a few minutes? She forgot to prepare some desserts for us as she walked out, and then she quickly walked away. I looked around, realizing that the other woman was no longer there. I could sense all of us panicking and being afraid. Only a few seconds later, footsteps started approaching us from the end of the hallway. I immediately ran towards the door and opened it, letting us all out as we could hear the woman calling us to wait. We all ran down the yard and didn't stop until we got back to my house. We sat in my yard, scared and confused about what just happened. We thought about telling our parents, but we knew they would be mad at us for stupidly going into someone's house when we've been warned so many times before not to enter anyone's house, so we didn't say anything. After a while, we finally resumed trick-or-treating in my neighborhood, became more cautious, and tried to make sure we weren't the only kids walking around. It was the weirdest thing that ever happened to me on Halloween. And my friends and I still talk about it every Halloween, about what we think those women were trying to do, and what would have happened if we stayed at their house for dessert.